A wealthy man extended an invitation to his former girlfriend for his wedding, intending to flaunt his achievements, only for her to arrive with his 3 children. Welcome to Stories After Dusk. Before we begin, settle in and remember to like and subscribe to ensure the tales keep flowing. Let us commence. Edward Langston embodied the essence of a self-made success narrative. Growing up in a working-class community, he often found himself lost in dreams of breaking free from the struggles of his early life. Edward's formative years were defined by challenges. His father labored in a factory, while his mother balanced multiple part-time jobs to ensure they could get by. Observing their sacrifices ignited Edward's resolve to forge a brighter future. He promised to transcend his situation, directing his drive towards achieving outstanding academic success. His dedication secured him a scholarship to a renowned university, where his intellect and unwavering commitment distinguished him from others. In the whirlwind of university life, filled with deadlines and dreams, Edward crossed paths with Clara Matthews. Clara stood in stark contrast to Edward in numerous aspects. He was a pragmatist, laser-focused on his goals, while Clara embodied the spirit of a dreamer and an artist, discovering beauty in the imperfections of life. By a stroke of serendipity, they encountered each other at a campus art exhibit, where Edward found himself entranced by Clara's creations. Her paintings conveyed narratives of hope, resilience, and the essence of the human spirit, qualities that Edward admired yet felt he lacked. The two swiftly found themselves entwined in love, their differing personalities forging an intense bond. Clara emerged as Edward's anchor and guiding light throughout his challenging academic path. For Clara, Edward was a constant source of support, inspiring her to chase her artistic aspirations. As Edward moved from the realm of academia into the professional sphere, their connection deepened. In the formative days of his startup journey, Clara stood as his unwavering support, both emotionally and financially, for a tech company poised to transform the landscape of e-commerce. She had faith in Edward's vision, frequently putting in extra hours at her part-time job to help realize his dream. Their humble apartment served as both a sanctuary and a creative hub, adorned with Edward's whiteboard sketches and Clara's artistic expressions. Amidst the turmoil of their existence, they united in a shared vision, crafting a future that harmonized their aspirations. As Edward's business flourished, the fissures in their relationship grew more pronounced. As his success flourished, it required an increasing amount of his time, leading him to devote his full attention to his craft. Networking events, investor meetings, and late nights away made Clara feel more and more overlooked. She longed for the Edward who had once embraced her aspirations and cherished their bond. Edward, conversely, started to perceive their relationship as a hindrance. Interpreting Clara's worries as a deficiency in support, he became bitter towards her efforts to bridge the gap. Disagreements turned into a frequent event, eroding the affection they had once known. The pivotal moment arrived amidst a heated confrontation regarding their future. Clara confronted Edward, asserting that his ambition took precedence over their relationship. In response, Edward retorted defensively, suggesting that Clara was the one impeding his progress. The intense confrontation concluded with Clara departing, her heart shattered, while Edward immersed himself further in his tasks, believing that achievement would somehow replace the emptiness she had created. Edward's risk bore fruit. In just a few years, his startup transformed into a well-known brand, propelling him to remarkable fame and wealth. Magazine covers showcased his accomplishments, transforming his life into a carefully crafted portrayal of opulence and triumph. Amidst a circle of dazzling companions and immersed in a world of opulence, Edward reassured himself that he had left the past behind. Clara faded into the background, a page he decided to turn away from. In the meantime, Clara's life veered into uncharted territory. Shortly after their separation, she found out she was expecting. The discovery carried a mix of joy and sorrow. Filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension about the journey ahead, Clara resolved to embrace motherhood on her own, fully aware that Edward would not relinquish his dreams for the sake of a family. With unwavering strength and self-reliance, she took on the challenge of being a single mother, committed to nurturing a warm and loving environment for her children. Clara's life underwent a profound transformation when she welcomed Triplets into the world. Her days transformed into a whirlwind of diapers, feedings, and endless sleepless nights. Amid the turmoil, she unearthed a profound sense of direction. Navigating the challenges of raising 3 children single-handedly was a formidable task, requiring her to balance various jobs while setting aside her own aspirations to ensure her family's well-being. In the face of adversity, Clara steadfastly chose to keep bitterness at bay. Instead, she channeled her feelings into her creations, producing works that struck a chord with many and garnered her a humble recognition within the local art community. Her children flourished in a nurturing environment, never fixating on the void left by the man who had departed from their lives. Clara frequently reassured herself that Edward was not a necessity in her life, and for the majority of the time, she truly held that belief. Her universe centered on her children, and their joy was her sole priority. Years later, a luxurious envelope appeared at Clara's doorstep. The graceful lettering beckoned her to the nuptials of Edward Langston and Veronica St. James. Her hands shook as she absorbed the words, a whirlwind of feelings surging within her heart. Long-buried memories resurfaced, evoking a tumult of sorrow and anger. Edward's invitation was far from a gesture of peace. It was a triumph and a poignant reminder of the life she had allegedly overlooked. Clara grappled with the choice to go, aware that it would unearth deep-seated feelings. As she gazed at her children, vibrant and thriving, her determination deepened. Edward was entitled to confront the reality of the life he had abandoned. This invitation signaled the beginning of an unexpected journey for Clara. She had transformed into someone entirely different from the person Edward had left behind. She had transformed into someone strong, insightful, and prepared to face the man who had previously shattered her heart. What Edward perceived as a glorious showcase of his accomplishments would, in fact, put to the test the meticulously crafted persona he had established. His wedding day, intended to be a pinnacle of joy, was on the verge of transforming into a moment of reckoning that would compel him to face his past and its repercussions. Edward's wedding to Veronica St. James was set to be the highlight of the season, featuring a select guest list that boasted tech moguls, celebrities, and influential political figures. The gathering took place at an extravagant estate, embellished with exotic blooms, sparkling chandeliers, and luxurious decor. Each element carefully crafted to illustrate Edward's ascent to the heights of achievement. This was more than a wedding. It was a proclamation of his victory. Amidst the numerous invitations lay one directed to Clara Matthews, adorned with bold, graceful lettering. Edward paused momentarily before inscribing her name, yet he ultimately concluded that her inclusion would epitomize his triumph. He envisioned her stepping onto the estate, subtly elegant yet feeling out of sync, her face revealing a hint of sorrow as she absorbed the magnificence she might have belonged to. Yet Edward misjudged Clara. The invitation shattered the serene cadence of her existence, and as she absorbed its words, feelings she had meticulously buried surged forth once more. Echoes of affection, sorrow, and the enduring journey that came after emerged once more. Clara swiftly perceived the meaning behind Edward's gesture. It wasn't about finding resolution. The move was strategically orchestrated. Rather than yielding to his story, Clara decided to show up, not as a vanquished shadow from his history, but as a symbol of her fortitude and perseverance. She would remind Edward that her existence, while distinct from his, held its own significance. What Edward envisioned as a display of dominance would transform into an unexpected clash, paving the way for undeniable truths he could no longer overlook. For a brief instant, Clara contemplated tossing aside the invitation, discarding it, and continuing her life as though it had never been part of her story. Yet her thoughts drifted to her children. Having grown up without their father, Clara dedicated herself to shielding them from the bitterness of her past. Yet, she found it impossible to overlook the questions that naturally arose in their minds. The truth was their right, even if it meant having to confront the man who had brought her so much pain. In the days that followed, Clara grappled with her emotions, as anger, sorrow, and curiosity each took their turn in her heart. A part of her longed to maintain distance, to prevent past scars from being disturbed. Another aspect, the one that had struggled to provide her children with a good life, yearned to confront Edward. She envisioned entering his wedding not as the broken woman he might anticipate, but as a strong, determined mother who had crafted a wonderful life for herself and her children. Clara felt no desire for vengeance. Instead, her wish was for Edward to recognize the reality. He had moved on, and so had she, with her narrative reflecting resilience and determination. Upon Clara's decision to attend the wedding, she was certain that solitude would not accompany her. Her 5-year-old triplets, her everything, and her joy would be by her side. Their presence conveyed a depth that words could never capture. Clara was determined not to create a disturbance, yet she was equally resolute in her decision to stand her ground. Their children were entitled to meet their father, regardless of how unforeseen the situation was. As the wedding approached, Clara found herself enveloped in a blend of nervous anticipation and determined focus. She selected a dress that exuded elegance while remaining subtle, embodying her serene self-assurance. She described the situation to her children in straightforward language, letting them know they would be seeing an old friend. The triplets, excited by the prospect of a lavish celebration, stayed blissfully oblivious to the underlying meaning. In the meantime, Edward stayed just as unaware. Consumed by the intricate aspects of the occasion, he imagined a perfect gathering that would highlight his achievements. Veronica, his fiancée, shared an equal enthusiasm for the splendor of the occasion, keen to establish her role as the partner of one of the nation's most powerful figures. To Edward, Clara was a relic of a bygone era he had left behind, a faded page eclipsed by his successes. Her presence at the wedding would only highlight the journey he had undertaken. On the morning of the wedding, the estate sparkled beneath the radiant sun. The estate was a vision of opulence, with expansive gardens filled with rare flowers, shimmering chandeliers hanging from majestic tents, and tables elegantly set with exquisite china and silverware. Visitors poured in, emerging from their polished vehicles into a realm of meticulously crafted luxury. Edward, in the midst of his preparations for the ceremony, found his mind wandering to Clara, picturing her wonder as she entered this showcase of his achievements. He was confident in his superiority until she made her entrance. As Clara entered the hall, it felt as if time had come to a standstill. Her dress, both simple and elegant, along with her quiet confidence, effortlessly attracted attention. Yet it was the 3 children beside her who truly enchanted the room. With their beaming smiles and notable likeness to Edward, they grasped Clara's hands as they stepped inside, crafting a moment that hushed conversations and stirred whispers throughout the gathering. Who were these children, and what was the reason for their striking resemblance to the groom? Edward's meticulously constructed realm started to fracture. The image of Clara surrounded by 3 children, each reflecting his own features, was an unexpected revelation for him. Clara's presence transformed the whole atmosphere. She wasn't present to celebrate his successes or lament mischances. She arrived to unveil a narrative Edward had overlooked, one that would alter the trajectory of both the day and his existence. On Edward Langston's wedding day, the magnificent estate loomed as a symbol of his affluence and influence. Every detail, from the imported flowers to the live orchestra, radiated luxury. The ambience was ideal for the joining of Edward and Veronica St. James, a pair whose bond epitomized achievement and prestige. Amidst the shimmering chandeliers and opulent displays, the entrance of Clara and her children transformed the meticulously planned event into an unexpected spectacle that Edward could never have anticipated. Within the bridal suite, Veronica radiated grace and sophistication. The gown, meticulously crafted and adorned with pearls and diamonds, showcased her exquisite taste and drew every eye in the room. Born into a world of opulence and entitlement, she was the perfect counterpart for Edward, who sought to elevate his status and gain recognition. She reveled in the magnificence of the event, relishing the admiration and the anticipation of becoming the spouse of one of the country's most distinguished figures. As her bridal party attended to the final touches, Veronica admired her reflection, a satisfied smile gracing her lips, certain that the day ahead would be one to remember. In the quiet of a secluded room, Edward stood by himself, carefully adjusting his tie as he readied himself for the crucial moment that lay ahead. A sense of fulfillment enveloped him as he contemplated his path, his successes, and the enduring mark he was poised to leave behind. This day transcended mere celebration. It stood as a powerful declaration of victory. Taking a moment to evaluate his refined appearance in the mirror, Edward indulged in a brief sense of pride. His carefully crafted existence was progressing precisely as he had imagined. For a moment, his mind wandered to Clara Matthews and the alternate life that could have unfolded had he made different choices. Inviting Clara was a strategic decision, one he anticipated would have minimal effect. He envisioned her entering softly, presenting a courteous smile before merging with the throng, hardly making a splash in his elaborate gathering. Edward was completely unaware of the extent of his impending misjudgment. Clara, in contrast, faced the day with a mix of apprehension and determination. She meticulously dressed her triplets in matching formal outfits that complemented her own elegant ensemble, paying attention to every detail to achieve perfection. The children, brimming with enthusiasm for the grand occasion, remained blissfully oblivious to the deeper emotional implications. As Clara navigated the road leading to the estate, she pondered the individual she had evolved into. The once shy, idealistic young woman who had envisioned a future with Edward was now a distant memory. She had transformed into a mother, an artist, and a strong woman who crafted a meaningful life according to her own vision. Her heart raced as the estate's magnificence unfolded before her, a vivid testament to Edward's desire to flaunt his achievements. Yet Clara had not arrived at a sense of being lessened. She had arrived to proclaim the reality that Edward had persistently overlooked. Clara's arrival was truly a sight to behold. As she emerged from her unassuming vehicle, flanked by her 3 children, she effortlessly captured the gaze of those around her. Eyes were drawn, and murmurs spread among the onlookers as they approached the venue. It was not merely Clara's presence that ignited the commotion. Her children bore a striking resemblance to Edward. The triplets, with their striking eyes, defined features, and recognizable mannerisms, were an unmistakable mirror of the groom. It felt as if the past Edward had tried to bury had unexpectedly emerged, unwelcome and impossible to ignore. Within the venue, the ambience transformed as news of Clara's arrival circulated rapidly. Visitors pondered her identity, her past with Edward, and above all, the surprising existence of her children. As Clara stepped into the grand hall, every gaze was drawn to her. The orchestra stumbled, the melody briefly faltering as the musicians glanced over, curious about the source of the disturbance. Clara, unbothered by the gaze of others, moved with a serene grace, her children standing beside her as a steadfast barrier. The triplets, oblivious to the underlying tension, were enchanted by the opulent decorations, their enthusiasm a striking juxtaposition to the discomfort that lingered in the air. From his position at the forefront, Edward halted as his gaze fell upon Clara. For a brief instant he failed to identify her. She exuded a powerful aura and self-assurance that was a stark contrast to the woman he once knew. Yet, it wasn't solely Clara who captivated his attention. His gaze fell upon the 3 children beside her, and a sudden wave of recognition froze him in place. Their likeness to him was undeniable. As the truth dawned on him, Edward's meticulously maintained facade began to unravel. These were not merely Clara's children. They were his as well. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the room itself paused, enveloped in a delicate transformation of energy. Veronica, immersed in casual dialogue with the guests, noticed Edward's expression and instinctively traced the direction of his gaze. Her smile wavered, becoming still as her gaze fixed on Clara and the triplets. A brief moment of confusion and disbelief flashed across her face before she turned to Edward, her eyes silently pleading for an explanation. After many years, Edward was at a loss for words. Clara advanced with careful strides, her movement intentional. A murmur of intrigue coursed through the attendees, their fascination impossible to contain. Who was this woman, and how was she linked to Edward? As Clara and her children arrived at the heart of the room, She paused and directed her attention towards Edward. For a moment, the silence hung heavily in the air, burdened by memories, unvoiced realities, and the time that had kept them apart. Edward, caught in a whirlwind of disbelief and embarrassment, fought to grasp the unfolding spectacle around him. Clara, unwavering and determined, at last shattered the stillness. "Hello, Edward," she said, her tone steady yet resolute. "It has been quite a while." The triplets, feeling the unease in the air, grasped Clara's hands tightly, their curious eyes scanning the expansive room. Veronica, clearly on edge, moved nearer to Edward and murmured softly to him. Her words hardly made an impact. Edward's attention was completely devoted to Clara and the children. The space felt as if it were closing in around Edward as he wrestled with the weight of the occasion. This was not just a simple disruption to his wedding. It was a confrontation with a reality he had long evaded. Clara's arrival, along with her children, disrupted the meticulously crafted facade that Edward had established. The day he had imagined as the height of his accomplishments was slipping away from him. The once vibrant hall succumbed to an unsettling stillness, the guests immobilized as they observed the unfolding drama. Clara Matthews stood confidently, her 3 children beside her, confronting Edward Langston. The whispers that started as soft murmurs have now ignited into a blaze, fueled by the striking similarity between the triplets and Edward. Edward, who had always exuded calm, now found himself frozen in place, his expression revealing a blend of bewilderment and discomfort. It felt as if the core of his existence had been upended, leaving him searching for a sense of balance. The epiphany hit like a crashing wave. These children belonged to him. Veronica's meticulously crafted facade faltered as she faced Edward, her expression a mix of doubt and concern. Her voice, cutting and deep, sliced through the atmosphere of unease. "Edward," she insisted, drawing him away from the crowd. "Who is that woman and the children with her? Who are those individuals?" Edward found himself adrift in a sea of confusion, his thoughts tangled and elusive, refusing to coalesce into any semblance of clarity. How could he articulate something he was just starting to grasp himself? Clara, feeling the gravity of the situation, seized the initiative. She wasn't there to create a disturbance, yet she refused to allow Edward to dodge the reality of the situation. Her voice resonated throughout the room, steady and resolute. "These are your children, Edward," she stated, her tone measured and intentional, introducing James, Amelia, and Theo. Every name resonated with a sense of pride, affirming their rightful position in the world. The triplets looked up at Edward, their wide eyes brimming with wonder, unaware of the tempest gathering in the distance. The announcement surged through the audience, creating a palpable tension in the air. Gasping filled the air, and whispers of astonishment rippled through the crowd. "His children," a voice murmured, laced with disbelief. "Were you aware that he has children?" One of the attendees whispered softly, inclining towards their friend. The atmosphere was thick with whispers, yet amidst the chaos, Edward remained still, his meticulously built reality fracturing beneath the burden of Clara's revelation. The unexpected disclosure that Edward, the groom, had 3 children previously unknown to anyone sent ripples of disbelief through the room, dismantling the polished facade of the man everyone believed they understood. His chest constricted as he looked at the 3 tiny faces peering back at him. It was undeniable. They belonged to him. James possessed a striking jawline, while Amelia inherited his intense gaze, and Theo reflected his resolute demeanor. It felt as though destiny had inscribed fragments of Edward within each of them, ensuring that no one could question it. Yet, in the face of undeniable truth, Edward found himself wrestling with acceptance. His existence unfolded through a sequence of carefully orchestrated choices, each one paving the way to his achievements. The unexpected emergence of these children, concealed from him for an eternity, posed a risk to dismantle everything he had built. "What is happening? Could you clarify what you mean?" he faltered, his voice wavering. This cannot possibly be true." As he faced Clara, his expression was a blend of disbelief and frustration. Why didn't you share that with me? What is the reason for this moment? His defensive tone only strengthened Clara's determination. She had foreseen his response and steeled herself for it. Drawing in a calming breath, she locked eyes with him, her voice resolute but laced with feeling. Clara responded, I didn't mention it because you were gone, Edward. Your aspirations were evidently prioritized above all else. After our breakup, I discovered I was pregnant, but by that time, you had already moved on, pursuing your aspirations. Her words lingered in the atmosphere, a poignant reminder of the decisions Edward had embraced and the repercussions he had overlooked. Clara's voice took on a gentler tone as she pressed on. I brought them up by myself and I have no regrets about it. Yet, it is only fair that they come to know their father, just as you should have the chance to know them. Edward's thoughts surged as he absorbed her words. He was seized by a relentless guilt, piercing and inescapable, as the weight of his missed opportunity dawned on him. Milestones faded, memories eternally vanished. As regret consumed him, a surge of anger emerged. Frustration directed at Clara for keeping secrets, frustration with himself for the decisions made, and frustration over the situation unfolding so openly. In that moment, Veronica remained motionless, her shock transforming into a seething anger. She faced Edward, her tone cutting and insistent. Is this accurate? Are those truly your offspring? Edward, ensnared by the burdens of his history and the tumult of the now, could merely acquiesce with a nod. The silent acknowledgement was carved into his expression. Veronica's face twisted in a storm of fury and disillusionment. This was meant to be her day, her moment, yet it was now clouded by an unexpected revelation. The audience, thoroughly engrossed in the unfolding narrative, shared hushed murmurs or remained transfixed, unable to divert their gaze. Edward, besieged by the escalating demands, sensed the walls tightening their grip around him. What had begun as an idyllic day had spiraled into a haunting reality, and the undeniable truth Clara carried loomed over him like a dark cloud. Clara, nonetheless, maintained her poise. Her intention was not to embarrass Edward or disrupt his wedding. Her aim was clear, to make certain her children understood their father and that Edward confronted the reality of his history. As she gazed at him now, she perceived a man stripped of his former confidence and ambition, revealing instead a vulnerability that laid bare his struggles to face the reality he had long evaded. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the soft voices of the triplets emerged, dissolving the palpable tension that had lingered. With a gentle tug on Clara's hands, James spoke softly, his innocent question breaking the stillness of the moment. Mother, is he our father? The straightforwardness of the inquiry broke down the final barriers of Edward's resolve. He gazed at the children, their bright, eager eyes a poignant reminder of the affection and purity he had abandoned in his unyielding quest for achievement. In that instant, the gravity of his decision struck him profoundly, and Edward understood that no level of ambition or success could ever substitute for the family he had forsaken. The grand hall was shrouded in a palpable stillness, the atmosphere thick with tension as Edward Langston faced the truth he had long evaded. Clara's words echoed in his thoughts, each one unraveling the meticulously constructed facade of his ideal existence. Beside her stood James, Amelia, and Theo, his triplets, their innocent gazes a sharp contrast to the inner turmoil he felt. Wedding guests shifted awkwardly, caught in a dilemma of whether to remain or quietly slip away. What started as a joyous acknowledgement of Edward's achievements and affection had devolved into an unforeseen and intense clash. Veronica St. James, engaged to Edward, was the first to shatter the stillness. Her expression, a blend of fury, bewilderment, and shame, shifted toward Edward as her voice echoed through the hall. Is this a twisted prank? She insisted, her voice sharp. Edward, please say this isn't the case. Yet, the look of anguish on Edward's face revealed all her deepest anxieties. Words slipped away from him as his throat tightened and his mind raced. Veronica's poised facade started to fracture, her envisioned wedding disintegrating before the eyes of countless onlookers. Still reeling, Edward struggled to compose himself, instinctively seeking to deny, deflect, and preserve whatever fragments of his reputation lingered. As his gaze locked onto the three small faces observing him, he realized there was no way out. The reality was clear. They were indeed his children, and the hidden truth had come to light. Drawing in a trembling breath, Edward faced Clara, his tone laden with remorse and exasperation. "Why didn't you share this with me earlier?" he inquired, his tone laced with suspicion. Clara, ready for this moment, stood resolute. "You left, Edward," she said, her voice unwavering. "Your aspirations were unmistakably your top priority, above all else. By the time I discovered I was expecting, you had already departed, constructing your legacy, pursuing achievement. I refrained from sharing because I assumed you might not be interested in knowing." Her voice became gentler as she looked at the children. "Yet, it is essential for them to understand their father, and equally important for you to connect with them. That's the reason for my presence." Veronica's composure shattered. "You've held on to this secret for years, and now, on our wedding day, you choose to reveal it," she hissed, her words laced with malice. Clara faced Veronica's wrath with steady determination. "This isn't about you," she replied, her voice steady and resolute. "This concerns my children understanding the reality. I didn't arrive with the intention of disrupting your wedding. I arrived here because this message must be conveyed, regardless of any discomfort it may cause." The guests, whispering to one another, openly pondered the unfolding drama before their eyes. Some praised Clara's bravery, while others questioned Edward's integrity. The impact of the revelation was unmistakable, casting a shadow of discomfort over the gathering. Edward's colleagues shared knowing looks, their perceptions of him evidently evolving. Veronica's friends murmured in compassionate voices, gathering around the embarrassed bride-to-be. In the midst of rising tension, Edward understood that action was imperative. The gravity of the situation pressed heavily upon him, and the scrutiny from the audience felt overwhelming. Advancing, he fixed his gaze on Clara and the kids. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice softer, tinged with a sense of urgency. Clara acknowledged with a nod, grasping the situation. She knelt beside her children, offering a warm and comforting smile. "Why don't you three take a seat over there for a moment?" she proposed, gesturing towards a more tranquil corner. The triplets complied, their hands clasped firmly together. Edward guided Clara to a secluded room, distancing themselves from the curious gazes of the attendees. Veronica paused for a moment, her feelings swirling with a blend of frustration and intrigue. Within the confines of the room, the trio remained in a charged stillness, the air thick with unexpressed emotions. Edward's voice faltered, tinged with a sense of remorse. "I'm not quite sure how to begin," he confessed. "I was completely unaware. It never even crossed my mind." Clara interjected with a soft yet assertive tone. "I'm not here to bring you any harm, Edward. I am present because our children are worthy of more. They have a right to know their father, and you have the opportunity to be part of their lives, should you choose to embrace it." Her words embodied a blend of grace and provocation. This moment transcended Edward's ego or reputation. The story revolved around the children who had unwittingly found themselves entangled in the consequences of his decisions. Veronica's emotions surged forth, breaking free from her restraint. "This is utterly astonishing. Do you truly believe I will simply remain here and accept this? Edward, you've embarrassed me in front of all the people who matter to me. How could you conceal something so significant from me?" Her voice trembled, and tears started to well up in her eyes. "What sort of man am I truly committing to?" Edward, clearly unsettled, faced her, his voice thick with remorse. He spoke with genuine sincerity, expressing his lack of knowledge. "I promise I had no idea. If I had," he hesitated, words trailing off into silence. In reality, he was completely unaware of what actions he may have taken. The burden of his decisions weighed heavily upon him, a nearly insurmountable load. In the hall, the triplets sat in silence, their youthful faces reflecting confusion as they attempted to comprehend the turmoil around them. Guests murmured quietly, their whispers weaving through the air as the lively ambience shifted into a palpable tension. Clara ultimately made her way back to her children, her demeanor calm yet resolute. She knelt beside them, tenderly drawing them near. "Everything will be fine," she reassured them gently, even as the road ahead remained uncertain. In the meantime, Edward found himself in solitude with Veronica. He came to understand that he stood at a pivotal juncture. His meticulously crafted reality was coming apart, and the truth he had evaded for ages could no longer remain hidden. He now confronted a pivotal decision. Step up and embrace responsibility, or let his fear and pride steer his future actions. The wedding day had spiraled into chaos, and it was evident that their lives would forever be altered. Long after the guests had departed, their hushed murmurs of intrigue still hung in the atmosphere, while the reverberations of the clash persisted, casting a shadow over the opulent estate. Edward Langston found himself at a pivotal crossroads, one that would shape not only his identity but also the enduring mark he would imprint on the world. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting elongated shadows over the estate's vast grounds, Edward remained solitary in the quiet banquet hall, wrestling with the weight of his decisions. The dazzling chandeliers overhead appeared to taunt him with their radiance, starkly contrasting the chaos swirling inside him. Veronica St. James had burst out, her dreams of an idyllic wedding shattered. Her final words, filled with fury and a deep sense of betrayal, resonated in Edward's thoughts. "You've ruined everything. This is the individual I placed my faith in for what lay ahead, a person shrouded in mysteries even he was unaware of." Despite Edward's pleas for her to remain, to allow him the chance to mend what was broken, her overwhelming sense of humiliation and anger had closed the door on any possibility of reconciliation. As the limousine faded into the darkness, Edward realized their relationship had come to an end. His meticulously curated life was unraveling, and for the first time, he confronted the void of his painstakingly constructed achievements. In another part of the estate, Clara Matthews sat in silence with the triplets, anticipating Edward's next move. Despite her composed exterior, Clara sensed the heavy burden of the day pressing upon her. She accomplished her goal, unveiling the truth and providing Edward with an opportunity to embrace his role as a father. As the hours slipped away, Edward lingered in his solitude, and with each passing moment, uncertainty began to seep into his thoughts. Was it a mistake to challenge him in front of everyone? Would Edward ever muster the bravery to put aside his pride and accept the duties he had long avoided? In the hours that ensued, Edward's reality was irrevocably altered. Clara's words reverberated incessantly in his thoughts, every single one a new scar. Their right to know their father is undeniable, just as your right to know them is. The images of the triplets, bright-eyed, curious, and unmistakably his, haunted him. The truth of their being, and the extent of what he had already lost crashed over him like a relentless tide. In the midst of chasing after wealth and status, the first steps, first words, and countless milestones slipped away, unnoticed. Edward, who once reveled in his achievements, now found himself feeling more destitute than he ever had before. In the midst of all his achievements, he came to understand that he was missing the essence of what truly counts. The burden of remorse felt insurmountable, and for the first time, Edward faced the void that lingered in his existence. He had consistently identified himself through his achievements, allowing wealth and status to gauge his value. Yet, as he stood at the crossroads of his decisions, he realized that persisting on this path would cost him something far more valuable than any accolade, the opportunity to embrace fatherhood. Determined, Edward recognized that the moment to take action had arrived. He discovered Clara and the children in the garden, where the triplets frolicked beneath the gentle radiance of the evening lights. James assisted Amelia in her ascent onto the bench, while Theo's laughter echoed around them as he pursued a butterfly. Edward remained still, taking in the vibrant scene, so alive, so free from the complexities that surrounded them. It served as a touching reminder of what he had lost and the potential of what could have been. Clara caught sight of him and stood to greet him, her expression a blend of wariness and intrigue. Even though she had expected this moment, it still left her feeling uneasy. Edward drew near, his typical confidence giving way to an uncommon sense of fragility. His voice trembled as he started. "I've devoted my entire life to pursuing the wrong things. I once believed that achieving success would bring me joy, but now I realize the extent of what I've sacrificed along the way." Clara held her silence, her eyes unwavering as Edward pressed on. "The past is unchangeable, yet I feel compelled to make an attempt. I wish to support James, Amelia, and Theo if you would allow me to do so. I aspire to be the father they truly deserve." Edward's honesty shone through, yet his expressions were laden with doubt. He was a man venturing into uncharted territory, uncertain of the welcome that awaited him. Clara finally responded, her voice gentle yet resolute. "Fatherhood is not defined by extravagant displays or hollow promises. It's about being present consistently, day after day. It revolves around scraped knees, bedtime tales, and the importance of being truly present. Trust cannot be purchased, Edward. It must be earned." Her words provoked him, yet Edward embraced them as reality. In the weeks that followed, he embarked on a journey to demonstrate his worth. He entrusted tasks to others, taking a step back from his business to prioritize his children. The journey unfolded at a deliberate pace, filled with challenges along the way. The triplets, filled with uncertainty, put him to the test. Yet Edward continued to push through, attending school events, assisting with homework, and absorbing the little, meaningful aspects of their lives. Gradually, their defenses started to fall apart. From afar, Clara watched his endeavors unfold. Her doubt began to wane as she glimpsed a facet of Edward that had long been hidden from her view, the compassionate, loyal individual she once recognized. Even though their love story had reached its conclusion, she held a deep respect for the man he was evolving into as a father. For the first time, she found the courage to hope that he might transform. With the passage of time, Edward's focus transformed significantly. The bond he forged with James, Amelia, and Theo grew stronger, offering him a sense of satisfaction that no award could ever match. The individual who previously chased approval through his accomplishments now discovered it in the warmth and joy of his loved ones. His existence, transformed by intention and relationships, grew deeper than he had ever envisioned. Reflecting on the past, Edward recognized the crucial instance that transformed his reality. What started as a display of his achievements evolved into the driving force behind his metamorphosis. Amidst the laughter and warmth of a family gathering, with his children and Clara by his side, Edward came to the profound realization that he had attained genuine richness in life, not defined by possessions or accolades, but by the connections that held real significance.